Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you, David, for a great song. Don't we have great music?
Yay!
I'm so glad that you made it here safe today. It's treacherous out there. It's Easter morning. There are all those people that are trying to find that church that they go to on Easter.
True.
Some of them were being punished this morning by having to get up early and do it in the dark. Can you imagine? Here, you want a sunrise? It'll be on a PowerPoint slide. Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter.
Oh, you know, I'm known notoriously for my Easter messages. I have had to be forgiven a number of times for things I have said on Easter morning. But I believe I'm maturing. And that I'm prepared to take a different tack here with you today. And I've done my research, and I believe that I have resolved some of the mysteries of Easter, and I want to share them with you today. So the topic of, that's not the topic of my talk, that is. The first confusing thing about Easter is when it is. Have you noticed that? This year Easter falls in alignment with Passover. That is not always the case, even though the storyline of Easter is that it happened during Passover. But sometimes it's nowhere near Passover. Sometimes it's in March. In fact, it can be as early as March 22nd. The last time that happened was in 1818. But it will happen again. Be ready for this in 2285. Now, it can be as late as April 25th. And that one, we can get ready for it too. That'll be in 2230. Most of the time, it's somewhere in between those two dates. How do we know when Easter is? Well, they say there's a very simple formula, is that it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. But when's the spring equinox? Well, we know because we get a backlink on the spring equinox. But really, the easiest way to do it is just ask Google. Because Google always knows when it's Easter. So the reason that it moves around like that is because, of course, the Passover event is in the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar. And Easter is somehow based very roughly on the Gregorian calendar, and that was Pope Gregory who commissioned the creation of this calendar that we use still today. And they just don't line up. And you can bet that Pope Gregory wasn't going to have the major event of the Christian church set up on a Jewish calendar. So that's the way it is. It is when it is, and we'll figure it out on Google. So that's the date information. Now, this thing about Easter, of course, is that it's the high day of the Christian faith. It's the day of the resurrection of Jesus, right? And that has great significance to the story of the life of Jesus. And there are sermons going on all over the planet today explaining that, while the children are out finding eggs left by a rabbit. So my big question is, how do you reconcile that? Well, before we do, I want to begin by explaining that every culture has some kind of a wonderful spring festival event, some kind of celebration that winter's over and the new life begins. And, human beings for all of our time on this planet have rejoiced in the plants budding out and the flowers and all the beauty that comes with spring and finally being done with all that nastiness of cold weather. So we celebrate as a natural course. Somehow it gets into every culture. I thought I'd share some of the things that are going on around the world around this time of year. This is a picture from Poland. In Poland, the people celebrate spring by making marzana dolls out of straw. They take the dolls and parade them through the streets with all the crowds, making their way to the river or some other body of water, where they then throw the dolls into the water. It's called the drowning of the marzana, and symbolizes the end of cold, dreary winter. That's what they do in Poland. Whoops, we'll do the other way. Here we go. This is in Switzerland. A snowman is burned on a stake. Once the first flowers begin to droop. For dramatic effect, the snowman is often stuffed with explosives. That's what they do in the peaceful country of Switzerland. They have nothing else to do with their explosives. In Bulgaria, they celebrate Baba Marta Day, which means grandmother of March. Baba Marta is a cranky old lady who must be treated kindly, or she will bestow more cold, bleak weather on the people. During the celebration, Bulgarians adorn their wrists with red and white bracelets that symbolize health and fertility. People hand out red and white symbols to friends and loved ones and wish them peace and happiness. Isn't that lovely? In India, in the spring, people have a colorful tradition called Holi, H-O-L-I, as a celebration of the triumph of good over bad. Originally a Hindu tradition, Holi is celebrated as masses of people gather in the streets for a giant color fight, throwing dyed powder on each other. I think we have a run here in town where they do that kind of thing. Maybe that's where we got it. The good people of the Netherlands celebrate with a 12-hour, 24-mile flower parade of the Bollenstreek, which floats constructed of flower bulbs like hyacinths, tulips, and daffodils. Hundreds of thousands of people stand in the streets for 12 hours to watch the decorative and fragrant structures every April. Yeah. More than 400,000 people flock to Australia's capital, Canberra, for a massive flower festival each spring, which is in September. Down under. The festival includes concerts, art displays, horticultural workshops, and other recreational activities. In Bosnia, thousands congregate for the Festival of Scrambled Eggs. God, this is true. Massive amounts of scrambled eggs are cooked in huge pots and then handed out to the people. They show up to get their scrambled eggs. In Spain, they celebrate the Fallas Festival every spring, where 3 million people wearing medieval clothing turn up for a week of street parties and the incineration of these nainuts, which are satirical papier-mâché figurines stuffed with firecrackers. Boom! And finally, in Japan, the Japanese celebrate the Hanami, the blooming of the Japanese cherry trees. Hosting parties under their trees is a tradition that they have practiced for centuries. So there's lots of ways to celebrate spring. Wouldn't it make sense if we're going to have this experience of the Christian faith, of this mystical story of someone who was a God-man coming forth, being sacrificed, and then overcoming death, that somehow that might just get caught up in the spring idea of some of this. And that's basically what has happened. So we go back to eggs. Easter is the high holy day of all of Christendom, and it is celebrated with that story. And as I'm sure all of you know, the idea that is presented from a metaphysical point of view is that we rise above being crucified. But you know what? I don't want to be crucified anymore. Yeah. I'm kind of done with that.
Yeah.
So that metaphor doesn't quite work for me. So I'm looking at this thing, Easter, and saying, where's the metaphor that we as a metaphysical community can use effectively? And I looked, and I looked. And so I looked at the history of the early Christian church. They had this story that moved them deeply. They wanted to bring it to the world. But in many places, when they would share that they were Christians, they would be crucified. So, best not to make it too much of a public spectacle. Yet in the spring, at the same time that they're remembering this story, There are people around them, pagans, that are having wonderful rituals of fertility and the joys of nature and all of this great stuff. So they celebrated with them. And it actually happened that in the German cultures, the nomadic people of Germany were these pagans, and they did that kind of stuff. But their system included the worshiping of a pagan goddess called Estra. And Estra was this magnificent presence who the people just celebrated and celebrated for the arrival of spring, for the fertility, for the beckoning forth of life in all kinds of forms. And along with this goddess came some other symbols. One was a symbol, and you know what I mean by this when I say rabbits are known for their fertility. So the rabbit was considered a symbol of this, right? That's where the bunny came from. Another symbol of it was eggs. Eggs are an amazing thing. If you consider that an animal actually releases this hard-coated thing that has when the egg is laid, it has this tiny little speck in it that is the embryo. You can't make it out with the naked eye, it's just a little dot. And everything else in that egg is resources for that embryo to live on. And the embryo, as it grows, uses up those resources. It's a phenomenon that's quite amazing. And then the chick hatches out of this egg. So people seeing that thought it was a magical thing. That became one of these symbols of this celebration of Estra, which combined with the Christians and their story of the death and resurrection of Jesus became one celebration. That's why we call it Easter. That's why we have children out finding eggs hidden by a bunny. And it's okay, because that's what's going on at a lot of Christian churches this morning. The ministers stand there telling you about the death and resurrection of their Lord while the kids are out collecting Easter eggs. It makes sense when you know the story and the facts and the history of it. Here's my metaphor that really, really works for me. It's the egg. It's the egg. As I said, the egg is created with this tiny life form in it and lots of resources. Just like you live your life. You live your life from this place of who you are in this vast universe, and you have thoughts. And those thoughts are your resources. And a thought that at one time in your life may seem really big, eventually you accomplish it, you achieve it, and it gets to a place where, golly, it's really holding you back. That little chick in that egg, at a point, is in prison. It's used up all the resources. There's nothing else for it to consume in the egg. It has got to get out or it will die. And it's not easy. It's not easy for that little chick to get out of there. It's never actually stretched out. It's all cramped up in there. And this outside surface is hard. How's it going to get out? Yet it somehow knows to peck at it, and peck at it, and peck at it, and start to create a crack, and then a break, and then an opening. And after a while, with several rest periods in between, it manages to get out. Do you know that if the chick gets help getting out of the egg, it will not help the chick? It can be very devastating to it. In fact, I learned that the hard way. When we first moved up here from Florida, we're in this rural area, and Barbara wanted chickens. So we got chickens, and we decided that we would incubate some eggs. And we had this little bunch of eggs, and we were going to create these chicks by simply watching, like we weren't doing anything, but keeping them warm and turning them. But then the time came, and they started getting out of the eggs. One of them was really slow, and it really wasn't working. And I thought, how can it hurt? Just help a little bit. And I kind of cracked the egg open. Well, that chicken did live, but its claws were all dried up like this. It had to walk around on feet that didn't work. I did that. I did that because I got in that chick's way. And if that chick wasn't supposed to survive coming out of that egg, that would have been its natural course. But me interfering created a crippled chicken. For as long as it lived, that's the way it was. And every day I had to see it and think about that. And that was tough, but I learned my lesson from that. And the lesson that I think we all can have is that when we are caught up in an idea that at one time served us and was a resource, and we have outgrown that, we have to work our way out of that. We have to do the work to think a different thought that creates a different reality that takes us to a different place. That's our work. No one can save us from that. No one can fix that for us. It is our job to recreate our lives with a new thought that is bigger than the one before. Now, chances are, even the wonderful thoughts that we create to get out of that cooped-in space, and we break free and we have a new thought with new resources, there's every possibility that we're going to use those resources up too, and we're going to be cramped in a thought again. And then we're going to have to do the same thing again, but in a bigger way. It's our job to do that. That's the nature of life. All our thoughts are somewhat limiting. I mean, we have these grand abstract thoughts of the perfection of the universe and how we have everything we need. We don't act like that, though. In our day-to-day living, we have thoughts like, will that be enough money? Is this enough education? Have I done the right things to get where I want to go? We have limiting thoughts. And they have to be revised from time to time, especially when we're bumped up against that hard surface that's called a limitation. It is the ultimate result of any thought. So we move beyond that by breaking free, by remembering who we are, and making that space for ourselves a little bigger, and releasing into our experience more resources. The same way that little chick needs to break free out of that egg, we have to break free out of our limiting thoughts. And by doing so, we'll create more of the life we want. Life is a journey, it's not a destination. We never really get to the place where there's nothing else to think about. There's always work to do. We are always on that path of awakening. It's the path that Ernest Holmes called the path to Christ consciousness, to awaken to our full potential, our full possibility. But it's a path, it's not a destination. So let's stay on the path. Let's use this lovely idea of eggs to remember that when we think we've come to the end of something and we're stuck, that all we have to do is create something new and break free of that which was a resource and was valuable to us, but is now something that holds us to a confined space. And let that come forward in our lives. For me, that's the way to use Easter. That's the idea I get out of Easter that really works for me. And I hope it works for you too. I love you very much. Happy Easter.
So glad you're here. So glad you're here today. And now I'd like to invite our prosperity acceptors to come forward. Take out what you're going to give. And I want to thank you for being so generous. You are generous givers to this center. Thank you. And those of you, whether you're giving through the donation station in the social hall, whether you give through PayPal, whether you have your banks mail in the checks, whether you're part of the auto giving program that runs your credit card once a month. However you give, I am grateful for your gift. You help us to open a doorway to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world. Our second biggest country last month was not Russia, it was China. So we are touching the lives of, I believe, millions of people. And so thank you for your generous giving this day. And so what I know is that God is the source of all supply, that money is God in action, and that each of us is blessed. I know that we give from our fullness, from our trust and faith in the abundance of life. And as we give, that energy penetrates and permeates and fills the interspaces of the universe to awaken and touch the lives of millions of other us's. Yes. And I know that each one of us comes together this day to make this Center for Spiritual Living Asheville all that it was ever meant to be. It is a place of peace, a beacon of light, a tower of strength, and a fountain of wisdom that touches the lives of all who call it home. And we'll repeat our investment affirmation together aloud. I freely and joyously give from the abundance and fullness of my overflowing wealth, knowing my gift goes with love as it touches and blesses the world. And so it is. Baskets is blessed because whenever we give, no matter what we give, we go with our gift. There's only one. And so who are we but spirit in form as us, a golden light of love and clarity and peace and joy. I see that golden light pour forth from each one of us and fills up this room from the floor to the ceiling and all between the walls. This air is rich and blessed with God as us. And as Spirit moves in our lives, things happen. And so right here and right now, I know for all of us that we are touched, we are healed, and we are blessed. And I know that that energy cannot be locked up in a room, no matter how great the room. And so it's got to go out and circle our beloved planet and touch it and heal it and bless it right here and right now. Every being on this planet, all of us together. I know that that energy is always here and always now, blessing every one of us here today, everyone who has ever been here, and everyone yet to come. And so it is. We've got children.